You have to have a couple of net topology decisions before you get on the net. Do you want to have a peer-to-peer net? Pros, they're very direct, they're easy to troubleshoot, they're a lot of fun, and you can practice relays. The cons are they're less entertaining because most of the time the other stations don't see your traffic. You see that with N-beams a lot, that people like seeing what the other stations send. Um, one way to deal with that we've done with peer-to-peer is that you actually send one message to net control and another and the same message either to a neighboring station or two neighboring stations, and that actually keeps things pretty light and pretty involved and moving. The other option, of course, is use gateway nets on the on the same frequency. So you have a portable gateway and you put that up. Pros, you've got multiple recipients, makes it very easy. And it's somewhat easier to combine VARA, FM, and packet if you want to do that. Cons are, well, you are sending a lot of traffic. Some of it might not be the most useful to all the different hospital stations, but it keeps everybody involved and they get to read what the other people are writing. So there are different ways of doing that. Some people prefer peer-to-peer, others prefer gateway nets. It really comes down on what you can handle. Couple of pro tips. Always assume people do not know. The reason people are on the net is usually because they want to learn. So your first assumption should always be they don't know, and then you explore with them what the issue may be. And that's been very, very helpful. They get to ask questions very often. If I know the answer, I'll still throw it out to the group and say, well, what do you think? If I don't know the answer, I definitely throw it out to the group and ask them. Digital check-ins are very important. We wrote our own template for that because it helps all the stations to zero beat on that control station. That's very, very important because it solves a lot of the issues down the road when the actual traffic has been sent. So make sure they check in and the participant stations adjust to net control, not the other way around. Net control, once the view meter on VARA FM, which is what we use to set the receive, once that is set properly, that should not be touched anymore. If you're running into issues, then the station sending, the participant station, should be adjusting their TX, their transmit volume. 2 tries and then move on. That's been really, really important. Everybody gets 2 tries and then you move the net on. So something doesn't work, you say, okay, try one more time. And then they try, and if they can't make it work, then move on and say, we'll return later to you. And you go on to the next station. That has 2 big advantages. I wrote here the player loses a turn, so it's kind of like a game. But it has 2 big advantages. One, you're going down the list, the other people get to send traffic. And while you go down that list, the station that had the issue gets a chance to set their system right. They can check their audio levels, they can check their signaling's turned on, they can check their radios on the right frequency, et cetera, et cetera. So it actually provides them with a way. We now get to the point where people say, oh, hey, listen, come back to me after, and please, next station can go ahead. And so we keep on moving. So keeping the net moving is very important. Coach, but without slowing the net down. So sometimes when people run into issues, it can be a really quick issue, like saying, well, your sound modem isn't turned on, try that. And they say, oops, sorry about that. And then they send their check-in and it's fine. If it sounds like it's a bigger issue, move on and come back to them after all the other stations have received the exercise. Then you can talk to them while they're figuring out the exercise and they're filling out the forms, which can take anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes. So you do have that time. Always ask for group suggestions first, even when you know the answer when running into a challenge. I found that an extremely valuable way of doing things because, one, it gives people a chance to talk with one another, and there's a lot of great knowledge in your group already. Take advantage of it and let people contribute, even if you know the answer. And if you don't know the answer, then, you know, very often it's your best bet. And that's been extremely valuable, and it's fostered a great team spirit. One of the things you see with our digital group is, even if they haven't met, when you introduce them, oh, he's on our Thursday night net, they're almost instant best friends at deployment exercises. The other thing is limit the exercises to a maximum of 1.5 hours. We usually try to keep it under 1 hour. Having that time pressure in there makes for much more efficient nets. And it also means that people have to really, really quickly solve problems. One of the results of that has been that the people on our digital nets do not ever panic when something doesn't work. They all have these mental, and some of them have written down checklists of what they check, what the 5, 6 most common problems are, and they go through those extremely quickly. And whenever there's a challenge, they figure it out, and they figure out a way around it, or they fix it. And by keeping it to an hour, independent of how many people check in, for us it can be 10, 12 people, that's kind of the maximum of people that we have, means you have to keep the net moving, and everybody understands that. A net control station needs to ensure that the net participants have the skills and equipment to get the job done. That's the role of all good management, right? You're not doing the job yourself. Everybody who participates in the net gets to contribute and work together as a team to get the job overall done. And that's very, very rewarding. Let me give you a couple of examples for scenarios. Natural disasters, they're always fun to do. Earthquakes, one of my favorite scenarios was the Dwayne earthquake, we called it. That was kind of built on the movie San Andreas, for those of you who've seen it. The Rock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character is portrayed as this former military person who then becomes LA firefighter, LA Fire Department firefighter, who can apparently rip off doors of Subarus in midair. And, so it's an all-around hero. And then the big earthquake hits, and the first thing he does is he steals a one of the 17 helicopters the LA Fire Department has to go to San Francisco and save his wife. And, so it kind of generated a whole lot of funny exercises for us in terms of, well, now you're left alone because of one helicopter that you had. So how do you deal with that? Floods, not a big issue for us generally. The statewide medical health exercise deals with it this year. We've been using it to keep things very light, so people have to deploy using dinghies and send in their position reports on a regular basis. Those things. Volcanoes, that'll be certainly something that'd be interesting for you. Movies are a big inspiration for a lot of this because, again, we want to keep it light and fun. Man-made disasters, terrorist attacks, power outages, wildfires are a big deal for us, and so we do those. And again, you can do them all in very serious fashion. I like to keep things light. Other people like other net control stations like to be more serious. Zombies, again, Halloween's coming up. That'll be a whole lot of fun. Terrorist attacks, one of the exercises we had that was actually on N-beams, had a group estimated between 4 and 6 go around, and I said, well, if security at the hospital takes out any of them, please report that back. And one station reported back that they had killed 14 terrorists. Again, this was all an exercise, was all a drill. And net control came back and said, okay, you need to redefine that. There were a maximum of 6 of them, so whoever else you had on there's probably probably an innocent bystander. So just keep that in mind. It makes it important to read the exercise and understand what it is people want, what net control and the served agency wants. Making these exercises and scenarios funny and fun is kind of a way to distract people and kind of lead them astray. So people get now very conscientious about reading what it is they're supposed to do, because they do get that feedback of saying, okay, listen, something went wrong here. Technological disasters, blackouts, which means essentially do the same thing as you usually do, but do everything on battery. Cyber attacks, they're always fun. And actual disasters, Puerto Rico, Katrina, Bahamas, In Puerto Rico, there was a case of an infant that desperately needed medication, and you can actually find that on the internet. And we actually took the medication list, we changed all the names, and we had that as an exercise a couple of times now, just to show people that if they had been in the chair of the amateur radio operator who had to send this, they would have been able to do that. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the guys. Every single one of them would have been able to send that information. So Katrina is rich with examples of traffic that needed to be sent. More recently, the Bahamas, obviously, a whole lot of supply lists and so on that needed to be sent. So take inspiration from that and ask yourself, well, how would we deal with that? So they provide scenarios provide context and distraction, and the distraction is an important part. You do want to check participants' responses. Again, one of the example, great operator, but his request was denied because it didn't give net control what net control asked for. Same, that happens with the terrorist example there too. The station that sent the 14 people, well, sounded very impressive, but you have to understand the downside of that is that you actually may have miscommunicated that information, and that may have resulted in more problems than you started with. So it's important to do it quickly. You don't have to go into detail, but quickly check people's responses and see that it's filled out correctly. When they're missing crucial information, for instance, like it's not signed, or especially with HICS 254s, the patient tracking, that needs to be approved by a hospital administrator who can make that approval. If that name is not on the form should never be sent. And those things you can have instant feedback on the net. And the benefit of that, doing it on voice, is also that all the people who are working the same exercise then get to double check their own work. There's quite often that people say, I thought it was done, I need another minute. And then you can move on and come back to them. So please keep that in mind. This is a constant improvement. We want to keep improving. Hot wash, we ask after every net, we ask participants at checkout, what went well? What could be improved? What did you think of the exercise? Was that relevant? Is that something that you would expect to see in an event? Have you seen that in a deployment? Did you think this was useful? Is there anything we could have done better? And we build around that. And the other thing is net control. You always want to evaluate your own performance. And as a participant, you always want to evaluate your own performance. Did it go as you expected? What went well? Did your system work? Was your antenna plugged in right? Did you use low power? I run all our nets on VHF on 10 watts. I rarely bump it up to 50. It's almost always 10. So things like that. What could be improved? Would more or less information have helped? Can you give feedback to single stations and say, listen, you could improve by doing X, Y, Z? And always remember, less is more. You don't want to overwhelm people. Again, if you're doing a single thing, let people work that out. If you have a very experienced group, maybe add another item. One of the things that we've been doing is, for most exercises, everybody knows they need to send a hospital status assessment. So some stations have gone over to already having one ready, and they sent that with their check-in. And that's kind of where we want people to be, that they understand that that needs to be sent in a real disaster or in a large-scale exercise. That needs to be the first thing that goes out to the MAC. And finally, the best nets are the ones where the group overcomes adversity and everyone learns. And that includes net control station, that includes participants, and yes, that includes all the people who are listening in who are too shy to actually hop onto the net, and you will have a lot of them. I would say we usually have between 6 and 12 people on the net, and I would say there's at least another 10 listening in that you have conversations with afterwards.